Today, a new chapter opens for our country. Those are not my words. That is the opening line in the Declaration of Acceptance by Maître Alice Nkom, the newly appointed spokesperson of the President-Elect Issa Tchiroma Bakary. A declaration delivered with courage, anchored in duty, and sharpened by the stakes of this precise moment. She goes on to say, this mission belongs to the Cameroonian people. The truth will be non-negotiable. Cameroon enters an era of courage, responsibility, and transparency. Hold that thought, because everything we've seen in the last 72 hours confirms it. Now, let's talk about what this means for the country. But first, hi, hello, salut, bonjour. I hope you're doing very well from wherever you're watching at this moment. As always, it's a privilege for me to connect with you as we try to make sense of what's going on around the world, specifically in the Republic of Cameroon, where we shine a spotlight on the issues affecting the nation after the presidential elections that took place on October 12. And a lot has happened, as usual. We start with the updates of the top. To begin with, the President-Elect has made his first public-facing appointment, and Maître Alice Nkom is now the official spokesperson of the elected presidency. This is a significant move, not just symbolic, but strategic. Now, here is where it gets more interesting. While the President-Elect is taking steps, even cautiously, the incumbent, President Paul Biya, the president that was proclaimed by the Constitutional Council and has taken oath, but has not yet formed a government. And that leads us to a crucial point. Let's pause here because the legal implications matter. By constitutional logic and political tradition, once a presidential election ends, the existing government is considered dismissed. A new cabinet must be appointed immediately after investiture. The absence of a new government today means Cameroon is functioning in a constitutional vacuum. Ministers currently in office are acting de facto, not de jure. But that's only part of the story. If you're wondering why Issa Tchiroma Bakary hasn't named a full cabinet, the answer is simple and dangerous. Anyone appointed publicly becomes a target. Atanganji's statement, the Minister of Territorial Administration, is very clear. Issa Tchiroma Bakary will pay wherever he is. That was not metaphorical. It was a signal of a manhunt. And this takes us directly to another key development. His team cannot reveal his location. Not for style, not for mystery, but because the regime is deploying surveillance networks, wiretapping teams, cyber units, and cross-border intelligence channels, all aimed at locating him. And beside the decree appointing Maître Alice Nkom as the spokesperson of the President-Elect, Issa Tchiroma Bakary also issued a very powerful statement that was relayed by Maître Alice Nkom and l'Union pour le Changement, headed by Issa Tchiroma. And in this message, Issa Tchiroma Bakary called on Cameroonians to never forget that Cameroon is going through one of the most difficult and pivotal times in the history of the country, and that the regime has not only been repressive within the last two elections, but he was able to enumerate incidents that date back to 1955 with the UPC movement, and how people have always been captured, tortured, and jailed, and some have even lost their lives in the process. He talks about 1990, talks about 1992, comes right up to 2018, and concludes with 2025. And in all these different instances, he was able to demonstrate the different situations that involved repression, oppression, and violence that the regime has always used to respond to any peaceful call for change, either through marching or even just ghost towns. And he also highlights that Cameroonians should never forget that they are the sovereign and the power lies in their own hands. A powerful letter like that would definitely go unnoticed by some Cameroonians because there's a lot of fatigue these days. People don't have sometimes the bandwidth to sit and digest these kinds of very transformative messages. And we understand why. Because on one hand, you have some Cameroonians that say they have information fatigue. That makes sense. They've always been used to being governed with some form of silence and laissez-faire and inertia by the regime in place. So when they hear communications that are coming back to back from a leader and as well as everyone else that were talking about this issue, some people may have communication and information overload. And on the other side, you have those folks who are losing hope because they are scared. Every time they hear about Issa Tchiroma Bakary, they are hearing that they have rumors that, oh, he's stuck in Gambia, he's not even in the country to come and fight for them, and some have even gone as far as questioning his health. And those are regime surrogates, of course. They are trying to say he's sick, he's not well, where is he, he's frail, they have reliable sources. Indeed, such voices don't help those who have doubts because they could well be thinking that, well, maybe they should just wait 7 more years will come and pass. And that is a trap. Because we've told you before, if this repressive regime survives this heated post-electoral climate, what will happen in 2032 would be worse than this. Because that is exactly why after 1992, the regime was able to perfect the craft of election rigging. They were able to craft a form of government that puts division in every sector. Even among families, the regime is capable of creating high levels of division. You don't need to look far. Look at the Cameroonian opposition. There's no unanimity. In the Western democracy, as they like to say, in functioning democracy as we prefer it, when there is a threat to Republican values, everybody comes together to defend the institutions and protect the values of the country. And we must always make it clear that the reason why we refer to Issa Tchiroma Bakary as President-Elect is because he is a force to reckon with. At least he has proven with his numbers, and millions of Cameroonians agree that his victory was stolen by the regime in Yaoundé. Although, according to Cameroon Constitution, the Constitutional Council is the only authority, as well as the Electoral Code, they all corroborate that the Constitutional Council is the only authority that can proclaim the winner of an election. The president of the Constitutional Council proclaimed President Biya as the official president of Cameroon, and he has since taken the oath of office and is seated in a Tudi at the Unity Palace and ruling over Cameroonians. But millions of Cameroonians say no. They believe Issa Tchiroma Bakary won the election based on the results that were plastered on the internet and are still there for everyone to see. With documented proof of gross irregularities, ballot box stuffing, election malpractice, corruption, there are leaked tapes of Elecam officials being corrupted and bribed. And to complicate matters in the minds of those who doubt Issa Tchiroma Bakary's abilities, some are already quick to question the choice of Maître Alice Nkom, because they are saying that why couldn't he appoint a young person? Maître Alice Nkom is 80 years old. To those people, let me tell you this much. Maître Alice Nkom, right now in Cameroon, is one of the few people, if not the only person, that can go toe-to-toe with Paul Atanganji and all his cohorts of repressive SDOs and governors and so on. She's one of the only people that can stand up to this regime from within Cameroon. She's in Douala. She's not out of the country. And you have to remember that the regime can use every loophole in the law, every loophole, to throw someone in jail, to make their lives miserable just because Issa Tchiroma Bakary mentioned their name. And Maître Alice Nkom can surmount all of that heat and pressure and continue to do the work using the same legal instruments, walking the fine line. People should never forget that what is going on in Cameroon right now is not child's play. If Issa Tchiroma Bakary mentions your name as part of his team and you reside within Cameroon, you cannot go about your business freely anymore. You become a target. And the regime will stop at nothing to make your life miserable. If they cannot get you, they'll get to your family. They'll do everything to bring you down. You don't need to look far. Where is Anise Ekane? Where is Joachim Chamani? Professor Abaoyono? Florence Ticho? Fabrice Lena? Parfait Mvum? Just to name a few. There are a host of others. Nobody knows what's going on behind the scenes, because some people are already quick to call Joachim Chamani a black leg, because there are communiques circulating that he may have written something calling for some form of appeasement and so on and so forth. But you don't know what people are facing. When the regime starts to torture you, sometimes people lose their senses. I mean, a key example is Longue Longue. Longue Longue used to say things, but when you saw the video, how he was tortured, you can just imagine why he came out. And the first thing you heard, Je veux voir mes enfants grandir. And there are many Cameroonians in Cameroon right now with this same thought on their lips. Je veux voir mes enfants grandir. In order to understand the moment better, let's widen the frame a little bit and just have a chat. You know, Cameroon is very unique in the sense that it has never known a proper transition through elections for a new president to come into office. And therefore, when you have a regime that has been in office for 43 years at the presidency, and before that, holding other top positions of power like the prime minister position that President Biya used to hold before becoming president, you would understand why ordinary citizens in Cameroon, including those working for the civil service, don't know how to conduct themselves and don't know who to pay allegiance to. Some of them don't even realize that they don't owe their allegiance to President Paul Biya and his ruling CPDM party, but rather to the state of Cameroon, the state that is supposed to stay and continue to function irrespective of the political party that was elected to be in office through their candidate. Because when we talk of the government, it's the prime minister and the ministers, all those whom President Paul Biya appoints to positions that are meant to be by decree constituting his government. Therefore, only secretary generals and below are meant to continue to carry out the activities of the state. Meanwhile, the government at the top is dissolved. But that is not the case, because what the ruling CPDM party is trying to do now is what they call passage and force. They are trying to use their force, their majority, and the money that they've amassed, and the keys to the treasury, and the access to the military to control the narrative. Because one would have expected President Paul Biya to hit the ground himself, doing the same tour you see Minister Paul Atanganji do. Minister Paul Atanganji and all the other ministers of the Biya government that are trying to use this period to continue to exert some kind of force on the Cameroonian people know fully well that they are de facto ministers and not de jure. So what they are doing is what they call passage and force. And as it stands right now, there's a lot going on in the country because arrests are still going on. Families that have loved ones detained and arrested don't even have the right information as to where to go. You have parents come on social media crying that they've not seen their children because some were arrested, either in Bafang, Chang, Bafoussam, Douala, you name it, and then taken to Yaoundé. and their parents have not seen them. And it's been almost 2 to 3 weeks now. Some were arrested way before the proclamation of results. Others were arrested on the 27th of October. More were arrested before the 6th of November. Others were arrested on the 6th of November and beyond. And some are still being arrested as we speak because there's a crackdown taking place. And that is what Issa Tchiroma Bakary was saying in his last video, that there is some form of ethnic cleansing and some repression against all those that belong to opposition strongholds, like the MRSA party or the FSNC of Issa Tchiroma Bakary. All this is going on while the same government is trying to organize regional elections that are scheduled for the end of the month. And Elections Cameroon has already held a few working sessions, during which they tried to gloss over the irregularities, the fraud, and the malpractices of the October 12 presidential elections. Meanwhile, all we hear from Elecam officials is that the elections of October 12 was conducted under normal circumstances and everything went relatively well. And therefore, they are looking forward to organizing regional elections at the end of the month. Now, before we do a deep dive, let's pause there for a moment, because there are some significant events that have occurred within the last 24 hours that I must update you about. Let's talk about Joseph Espoir Biya. You do recall that because of his outing on Equinox Soir on Equinox Television, one of the popular TV stations in Cameroon, he did make an utterance that even the policeman shooting at the people on the streets knows that Issa Tchiroma Bakary won the election. And everyone was sure that the reason why he was summoned to appear at the SDO's office in Douala was because he was saying something that the regime did not like. And therefore, there should have been some form of reprimand or maybe even arrest, as it's usually the norm. Again, early on in the morning before his appointment, Joseph Espoir Biya wrote an open letter informing everyone in the public that he's about to go meet the SDO and he doesn't know his faith. But he knows that just like the Umyobeis and others who lost their lives for the fight of independence of Cameroon during the days of the UPC movement, he knows that one day that may be his faith and he's ready for that. And as you can see, the young opposition deputy mayor of Douala 5e did not mince words. He went ahead to enumerate a couple of salient reflection points before his departure to the SDO's office. In the meantime, a battery of lawyers, headed by Maître Alice Nkom, had already issued a statement of their unflinching support to accompany Joseph Espoir Biya. And that could explain why, when he arrived, they were asked not to come in, and he was the only one who had to go and sit down with the SDO. And as you know, the media in Douala was on high alert because the case of Joseph Espoir Biya seemed like a déjà vu, and everyone was waiting that he would have gone in and not returned. But to the surprise of all, Joseph Espoir Biya emerged after a few hours, and he addressed the media and told them exactly what transpired, or more or less paraphrased. And he said that the SDO asked him why he wasn't going to work again. And he was shocked because he had been going to work and he has never been absent. He even mentioned that there are security cameras in the vicinity of the council where he works.
Le préfet m'a demandé pourquoi je n'ai pas appelé au travail à la mairie. Je lui ai dit que je partais au travail, que tout le monde peut assurer que je pars au travail, qu'il y a même les caméras à la mairie, que voilà.
And of course, it was a shocker for many observers because they could not understand how the senior divisional officer turned around to become an HR personnel, questioning Mr. Biya for his attendance at the council, where he works as an elected official. That was strange. But everyone with a critical mind would know that because of the pressure and the focus on this particular, summon, they were supposed to change and pivot and change their line of questioning. And as such is their strategy to let things cool off a little bit. And thankfully, his lawyers are clear because according to them, they will continue to monitor Mr. Espoir Biyon's case. They will not let anything happen to him without them knowing. And that is a strong message. And as we continue to tell you on this platform, repressive regimes don't like the spotlight. That's why we always encourage you to share to as many people as possible. Continue to push every content that you see out there that is talking about Cameroon, especially exposing the things that are going on, because the regime cannot act with their full repression when they know that the spotlight is on them. And that is why they were able to pivot. And when you hear a senior divisional officer turn around and start asking somebody, we hear that you have not been showing up to work, what's going on? There's even a couple that said you didn't celebrate their marriage. Again, all of those were not true, because like the deputy mayor said, there are cameras all over. There are security forces there. When he comes to the council, he greets them and goes in. And that at some point, if he hasn't been celebrating marriages, it's because the mayor has not been assigning him. And you can tell because, of course, the mayor is from a different party. So it explains. And Joseph Espoir Biyon is from the opposition. And being as vocal as he is, you can tell why the regime and their surrogates will be afraid of him. Because you and I know that there's no way the senior divisional officer of Uri would have summoned Joseph Espoir Biyon to appear with his ID card, just as they always do when they are about to detain someone, what they call garde à vue administrative. When they are about to suppress and torture someone, that's the technique they deploy. You go there and you don't come out. There's no way he would have been summoned only to be asked about his attendance at work. And then maybe a few lines of caution, you are a notable person. When you're speaking out there, you need to have some restraint. I mean, without necessarily saying exactly what he did. That's because they had to deflect. They had to change the subject matter. An honorable way to save face. But that is exactly why we're telling you that we need to continue to shine a spotlight. Because what about the people who are not like Joseph Espoir Biyon, who are not vocal enough, who don't have the support of a battery of lawyers, those that have been arrested in Chang, in different places, transported to Yaoundé to face a military court? What about those people? And that's why we're saying we need to continue to shine this spotlight until the regime in Yaoundé realizes that the Cameroonian people deserve better. They're not supposed to be treated like dogs, arrested, tortured, and detained, shot and killed, no mercy. It has to be the call of every Cameroonian, home and abroad. You have to exercise your rights peacefully, because, Joseph Espoir Biyon did not do anything extraordinary. He had no weapons. He had nothing. All he did was he used his voice. He used his presence. He used his wit. He used his intelligence. He used his wisdom. He used his resources. He used his networks. And at some point, divine intervention. And everyone that talked about his case, again, like we've said, it's not yet over, because the regime can look for any dirt to pin on you. And therefore, he knows to be on the lookout. They're going to look for any excuse. When you talk about someone like Fabrice Lena that was arrested and detained, we now hear stories that he's accused of having his name in a civil matter concerning a child whose birth certificate was discovered in an embassy. The child was about traveling, yada, yada. No, that story doesn't hold any weight. It doesn't hold weight. We know that, and it's a fact. Sometimes the regime will try to force you to even doubt the truth, because you're trying so hard, because they function in the gray area. They function in the benefit of the doubt. And everything is called preemptive measures, preemptive this. No, because veteran opposition leaders, civil society activists, Human Rights Watch officials will tell you that they've seen this playbook over and over. There are tons of Cameroonians, even within the SDO's office, that don't show up at work. But he hasn't questioned them about their attendance. He's summoning a mayor, a deputy mayor, to ask him about his attendance. That's a story that we cannot buy. And so once again, Cameroonians home and abroad, friends of Cameroon across Africa and the world, continue to be vigilant. And please lend your voice. Support in any way you can. Share this content. Leave comments and leave your thoughts. And make sure you subscribe to the channel. And therefore, if you like and hit that like button, because it helps YouTube to share it with like-minded people. And on to the next one. May God bless Cameroon.